My name is Evelyn Marston. I'm 71 years old, and I live in a small town in Vermont where everyone knows everyone's business. After my husband died 5 years ago, people started calling me controlling. They said I stuck my nose where it didn't belong. But let me tell you something. When you've lived as long as I have, you learn to trust your gut. And my gut was screaming that something was very wrong with my daughter's marriage. Karina, my beautiful 32-year-old daughter, had been married to Luther Greystone for 3 years. On paper, Luther was perfect. He worked as a bank manager, drove a nice car, and never forgot to bring flowers on special days. Everyone in town loved him. Everyone except me. There was something in his eyes when he thought nobody was looking. Something cold. Something fake. But whenever I tried to talk to Karina about it, she would get upset. "Mom, please stop," she'd say. "Luther is wonderful. You're being paranoid." Even my son Rayland would shake his head at me. "Mom, you need to let Karina live her life. Stop being so controlling." But I couldn't shake the feeling that Luther was hiding something. It started on a Tuesday morning in October. I was having coffee with my neighbor, Mrs. Beatrice Crowell, when she mentioned something strange. "You know, Evelyn," she said, stirring sugar into her cup, "I saw Luther at the grocery store yesterday. But he wasn't alone." My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "He was with a young woman. Very pretty, blonde hair. They seemed close. Too close for a married man." I felt my chest tighten. "Are you sure it was Luther?" "Oh yes, I'm sure. They were in the parking lot, and she had her hand on his arm. They were laughing about something." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Mrs. Beatrice Crowell had said. The next morning, I decided to drive by the bank where Luther worked. I parked across the street and waited. At lunchtime, Luther came out. He walked to a small cafe down the street. I followed, staying far enough back so he wouldn't see me. Through the window, I watched him sit down at a corner table. 5 minutes later, a blonde woman joined him. She was young, maybe 25, and very pretty. They held hands across the table. My heart was racing. I took out my phone and snapped a few pictures through the window. They weren't great quality, but I could clearly see Luther and this mystery woman together. I went straight to Karina's house after lunch. She was in her garden, planting fall flowers. "Honey, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She looked up and sighed. "Mom, if this is about Luther again." "I saw him today. With another woman." Karina dropped her gardening gloves and stood up. Her face was red with anger. "Mom, this has to stop. You can't keep spying on my husband." I showed her the pictures on my phone. "Look at this. Look at them holding hands." She barely glanced at the screen. "That could be anyone. Maybe it's his sister, or a coworker, or—" "Karina, please. Just look at the pictures carefully." But she wouldn't. She was too angry. "I'm calling Rayland," she said. "This obsession of yours has gone too far." 20 minutes later, my son showed up. He was not happy. "Mom, what are you doing?" he asked. "Following Luther around town, taking pictures? This is crazy behavior." "I'm protecting my daughter." "No, you're being controlling and paranoid. Luther is a good man. Just because you don't like him doesn't mean he's cheating." I felt so alone. My own children thought I was losing my mind. But I knew what I saw, and I wasn't going to give up. That night, I made a decision. If my family wouldn't listen to me, I'd have to gather better proof. Real proof that couldn't be ignored. I started small. I began paying attention to Luther's schedule, his habits, and his behavior around Karina. I noticed that he worked late a lot more than he used to. He was always checking his phone, even during family dinners. One Sunday, when they came over for dinner, I watched him carefully. His phone buzzed 3 times during our meal. Each time, he would glance at it quickly and then put it face down on the table. "Everything okay, Luther?" I asked sweetly. "Oh yes, just work stuff," he replied, but his face was red. After dinner, while Karina was in the bathroom, Luther stepped outside to take a call. I followed quietly and listened from behind the door. "I can't talk now," he whispered into the phone. "I'm at my mother-in-law's house." "Yes, I miss you too. I'll see you tomorrow night." My blood turned cold. That was not a work conversation. When he came back inside, I was sitting in my chair, knitting, acting like nothing happened. But inside, I was planning my next move. I decided I needed to learn more about this blonde woman. So I did what any concerned mother would do. I became a detective. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Luther had late meetings at work. So every Tuesday and Thursday, I parked near the bank and waited. Like clockwork, he would leave at 5:30 and drive to different restaurants around town. The blonde woman was always there waiting for him. I followed them to coffee shops, restaurants, even to a movie theater. I took pictures with my phone, making sure to get clear shots of their faces and their intimate behavior. After 2 weeks of this, I had quite a collection of evidence. But I wanted more. I wanted to know who she was. One day, I followed her after she left Luther at a restaurant. She drove to a small apartment complex on the other side of town. I watched her go into apartment 3B. The next morning, I drove back to the complex and checked the mailboxes. Apartment 3B belonged to someone named Rodin. That afternoon, I went to the town library and used their computer to search for Rodin online. It didn't take long to find her. Her name was Agatha Rodin, and according to her social media profiles, she worked as a dental hygienist in the next town over. But here's the interesting part. According to her Facebook page, she wasn't single. She was in a relationship with Luther Greystone. She had dozens of photos of them together going back almost a year. At restaurants, on weekend trips, at her apartment. In every photo, they looked like a happy couple. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the pictures. This wasn't just a fling. This was a full relationship. Luther was living a double life. Armed with Agatha's name and social media information, I dug deeper. What I found made my stomach sick. Luther hadn't just been cheating on Karina. He'd been planning to leave her. Agatha's Instagram had photos from a weekend trip they took to Montreal 2 months ago. The same weekend Luther told Karina he was at a banking conference. In one photo, Agatha was wearing a beautiful diamond ring on her left hand. The caption read, "Said yes to my forever. Can't wait to start our new life together." Luther had proposed to his mistress while still married to my daughter. But it got worse. Much worse. I found posts about Agatha looking at wedding venues. Posts about her shopping for wedding dresses. Posts about them looking at houses together in a town 3 hours away. They weren't just planning to get married. They were planning to disappear. I started thinking about Luther's job at the bank. His access to money. His knowledge of financial systems. A terrible thought crept into my mind. What if Luther was planning to steal money from the bank and run away with Agatha? What if he was going to leave Karina with nothing, no husband, no money, and possibly even debt or legal trouble? My hands were shaking as I printed out every photo, every post, every piece of evidence I could find. This was so much bigger than a simple affair. I tried one more time to talk to Karina and Rayland. I invited them both over for Sunday dinner and brought out all my evidence. Photos, printouts, everything. Please, I begged them. Just look at what I found. Luther is planning to leave you, Karina. He's engaged to another woman. But instead of being grateful, they were furious. Mom, this is stalking. Karina shouted. You followed them around. You looked through their personal information online. This is illegal. Rayland took the papers from my hands and tore them up. Enough. This ends now, Mom. You're going to stay away from Luther and Karina's marriage, or we're going to have to talk about getting you some help. Some help? What does that mean? It means maybe you need to talk to a doctor about this obsession, Karina said with tears in her eyes. We're worried about you, Mom. This behavior isn't normal. They left that night thinking I was a crazy old woman. But I knew the truth. And I wasn't going to let Luther destroy my daughter's life. Since my family had turned against me, I had to be more careful. I couldn't let them know I was still investigating, but I also couldn't stop. Not when Karina was in such danger. I started following Luther more carefully, making sure he never saw me. I bought a cheap disguise, a different colored wig, and some sunglasses. I felt silly, but it worked. That's when I discovered Luther's biggest secret yet. One Thursday evening, instead of going to meet Agatha, Luther drove to a storage unit facility across town. I parked far away and watched through binoculars that I'd borrowed from my late husband's things. Luther went into Unit 247 and spent about 30 minutes inside. When he came out, he was carrying a small box. He put it in his car and drove away. The next day, I went to the storage facility and talked to the manager. I told him I was looking for my son-in-law, Luther Greystone, because there was a family emergency. "Oh yes, Mr. Greystone," the manager said. "He's been renting Unit 247 for about 8 months now. Pays in cash every month." 8 months. That's when his affair with Agatha had started, according to her social media posts. I had to know what was in that storage unit. I spent 3 days planning how to get into that storage unit. I knew it was wrong, but I also knew that Karina's life might depend on what was inside. On Saturday morning, I waited until Luther and Karina left for their weekly grocery shopping trip. Then I drove to the storage facility. I told the manager that Luther had sent me to pick up something from his unit and that he'd forgotten to give me the key. The manager was young and seemed flustered. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't let you into someone else's unit without proper authorization." I started crying. Real tears, because I was so frustrated and scared for my daughter. "Please," I sobbed. "He's my son-in-law, and there's been a family emergency. My daughter is in the hospital, and he asked me to get some important documents from the unit." The young man looked uncomfortable. "Well, I suppose it's an emergency, but I'll have to come with you." "Of course, dear. Thank you so much." We walked to Unit 247. The manager unlocked it and raised the door. What I saw inside made me gasp. The storage unit was full of boxes, suitcases, and filing cabinets. This wasn't just random storage. This was someone preparing to disappear. "Looks like he's moving," the manager said, looking around at all the packed boxes. I walked deeper into the unit, my heart pounding. One of the filing cabinets was partially open. Inside, I could see folders full of papers. While the manager was distracted, looking at his phone, I quickly grabbed a folder and looked inside. What I found was worse than I ever imagined. Bank statements. Lots of them. But not for Luther's personal accounts. These were internal bank documents. Records of customer accounts, transaction logs, wire transfer receipts. Luther had been stealing money from the bank. Not just a little money, hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past 8 months. The papers showed fake accounts he'd created, money he'd transferred to offshore banks, customer funds he'd redirected. He'd been planning this for months. There were also fake identification documents, new driver's licenses, and social security cards for both Luther and Agatha under different names. In another folder, I found a timeline. Luther was planning to make one final, huge transfer of money on December 15th, just 6 weeks away. After that, he and Agatha would disappear forever. But the worst part was at the bottom of the folder. A life insurance policy on Karina. A big one. And it had been changed recently to make Luther the sole beneficiary. My blood ran cold. What was Luther planning to do to my daughter? "Ma'am? Ma'am, are you all right?" The storage facility manager was looking at me with concern. I realized I'd been standing there in shock, holding the folder of evidence. "Yes, sorry. Just a lot of memories in these old papers." I quickly slipped one of the bank documents into my purse when he wasn't looking. It was enough to prove what Luther was doing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that life insurance policy. Luther was planning to steal money from the bank and disappear with Agatha. But what about Karina? Was he just going to abandon her, or was he planning something worse? I had to act fast, but I also had to be smart. If I went to Karina or Rayland again, they'd just think I was being paranoid. I needed someone else to believe me. The next morning, I called the FBI. "I'd like to report suspected bank fraud," I told the agent who answered the phone. "Can you tell me more about this situation, ma'am?" I explained everything: Luther's job at the bank, his affair with Agatha, the storage unit full of fake documents and bank records, their plans to disappear in December. "These are serious allegations," the agent said. "We'll need to see your evidence. I have photos and documents. When can we meet?" 2 days later, I sat in a small office with FBI agent Martinez. I showed him everything: the photos of Luther with Agatha, the bank documents from the storage unit, screenshots of Agatha's social media posts about their engagement and plans to move away. Agent Martinez studied everything carefully. Mrs. Marston, this is very compelling evidence. We're going to need to investigate this immediately. What about my daughter? She doesn't know any of this, and I'm worried about her safety. We'll handle this carefully, he assured me. But you're right to be concerned. If Mr. Greystone is planning to disappear with this much stolen money, he might see your daughter as a liability. My worst fears were coming true. Agent Martinez explained that they needed to catch Luther in the act. They couldn't arrest him just based on the documents I'd found. They needed to see him actually stealing money from the bank. We're going to put the bank under surveillance, he told me. And we're going to monitor his communications with Agatha Roden. How long will this take? Probably a few weeks. According to your evidence, he's planning something big for December 15th. We'll be ready for him. Those were the longest weeks of my life. I had to act normal around Karina and Luther, pretending I didn't know anything. Every family dinner was torture, watching Luther smile and laugh while knowing what he was planning. Meanwhile, Agent Martinez kept me updated on their investigation. They'd confirmed that Luther had been embezzling money for months. They'd traced several fake accounts back to him. They were also watching Agatha Roden, who had already quit her job as a dental hygienist and was packing up her apartment. But the most frightening news came 2 weeks before December 15th. Mrs. Marston, Agent Martinez said during one of our phone calls, we intercepted some text messages between Luther and Agatha. They're not just planning to steal money and disappear. Agatha is pregnant. My heart stopped. Pregnant? Yes. And according to their messages, Luther is planning to tell your daughter that he wants a divorce right after he makes the final money transfer. But here's the concerning part. They're also discussing what to do if your daughter becomes a problem. I felt sick. What does that mean? We don't know for sure, but combined with that life insurance policy you found, we're taking it very seriously. As December 15th approached, Luther became more and more nervous. I could see it during our family dinners. He was distracted, jumpy, always checking his phone. Karina noticed too. Honey, are you okay? She asked him one night. You seem stressed. Just work stuff, he said, the same lie he'd been telling for months. Big project is coming up. If only she knew how big. Agent Martinez called me 3 days before the 15th. We're ready, Mrs. Marston. Tomorrow, Luther is going to make a test transfer. We know this because we've been monitoring his online banking activity. We're going to let him do it, and then we'll arrest him. What about Agatha? We'll arrest her too. She's been helping him set up the fake accounts. And Karina? Is she safe? We're going to have agents watching your daughter, just in case. But once we arrest Luther, she'll be completely safe. That night, I couldn't eat or sleep. Tomorrow, my family will finally learn the truth. Tomorrow, they would realize that I hadn't been controlling or paranoid. I'd been protecting my daughter from a dangerous criminal. December 14th started like any normal day. Karina called me in the morning to chat about Christmas plans. Luther left for work at his usual time. Agatha was at her apartment, probably packing the last of her things. None of them knew that FBI agents were watching their every move. At 2:30 p.m., Agent Martinez called me. It's happening, Mrs. Marston. Luther just transferred $500,000 from customer accounts into one of his fake accounts. We're moving in now. My hands were shaking as I hung up the phone. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time it was Karina, and she was crying hysterically. Mom, something terrible has happened. Luther has been arrested at work. They're saying he stole money from the bank. There are FBI agents everywhere. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. Where are you now? I'm at home. The agents want to talk to me. They're asking me about Luther's behavior, about whether I knew anything. Mom, I'm so scared. I'm coming over right now. When I got to Karina's house, there were 2 FBI cars in the driveway. I found my daughter in the kitchen, crying, while Agent Martinez asked her questions. Mrs. Greystone, he was saying, did you know that your husband had been having an affair? An affair? Karina looked shocked. No, that's impossible. Agent Martinez looked at me. I nodded. Mrs. Greystone, your mother has been working with us on this investigation. She discovered your husband's illegal activities and his relationship with another woman. Karina turned to look at me with wide eyes. Mom? You knew about this. Honey, I tried to tell you. I tried to show you the evidence. But you thought I was being controlling. Agent Martinez handed Karina a folder. These are photos your mother took of your husband with Agatha Roden. They've been in a relationship for over a year. M.A. Roden is also under arrest for helping your husband steal money from the bank. As Agent Martin. Other country. But we're married, Karina whispered. What about me? Agent Martinez showed her the life insurance policy I'd found. We believe your husband was planning to either abandon you completely or potentially harm you to collect on this insurance money. Karina started crying harder. I sat down next to her and held her hand. Mrs. Greystone, if it hadn't been for your mother's investigation, you might have been in serious danger. She may have saved your life. After the agents left, Karina and I sat in her kitchen in silence for a long time. Finally, she spoke. Mom, I'm so sorry. All those times I called you controlling, all those times I told you to mind your own business. You were trying to protect me. I just knew something was wrong, sweetheart. A mother's intuition is a powerful thing. But I was so mean to you. Rayland was too. We made you feel like you were crazy. I hugged my daughter tight. You weren't mean, honey. You were in love. Love makes us blind sometimes. But that's why you have family, to see things when you can't. Luther was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for embezzlement, fraud, and identity theft. Agatha Roden got 5 years for being an accessory to the crimes. The bank was able to recover most of the stolen money, and Karina received a settlement for the emotional damage caused by Luther's deception. But the real victory wasn't the money or seeing Luther punished. The real victory was getting my family back. Rayland came to see me the day after Luther's arrest. He was crying when he knocked on my door. Mom, I owe you the biggest apology of my life, he said. You were right about everything. You saved Karina's life, and all we did was call you controlling. You were protecting your sister too, I told him. You wanted her to be happy. There's nothing wrong with that. But we should have listened to you. We should have trusted your judgment. Karina moved back in with me while she rebuilt her life. We spent long evenings talking about the signs I'd noticed, the evidence I'd gathered, and how close she'd come to disaster. You know what the funny thing is? She said one night as we were having tea. Everyone always called you controlling. But you weren't trying to control my life, you were trying to save it. Sometimes being called controlling is just the price you pay for loving someone too much, I told her. 6 months later, at Karina's divorce party, yes, she threw a party to celebrate being free of Luther, she stood up to make a toast. I want everyone here to know something, she said, looking at me with tears in her eyes. My mother was called controlling, paranoid, and crazy for investigating my ex-husband. But if she hadn't been controlling, I might be dead right now. Sometimes the people who love us most are willing to look like the bad guy to keep us safe. She raised her glass. To my mom, Evelyn Marston, the most wonderfully controlling woman I know. Thank you for never giving up on me, even when I gave up on you. The whole room toasted to me, but I was too busy crying happy tears to drink my wine. They used to call me controlling. Now they call me a hero. But I know the truth. I was just a mother who loved her daughter too much to let her get hurt. And I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. This story shows us that sometimes what looks like being controlling is really just love that refuses to give up. Trust your instincts, especially when it comes to protecting the people you care about. Age and experience are not weaknesses, they're superpowers that help us see danger when others cannot.